my country. All Indians are my brothers and sisters. I love my country and am proud of its rich and varied heritage. I shall always strive to be worthy of it. I shall give respect to my parents, teachers, and all elders and treat everyone with courtesy. To my country and my people, I pledge my devotion. In their well being and prosperity alone lies my happiness. Jai Hind. Now the session begins and I invite Georgia Mariam Gio to have the discussion on the concept of computer managed instruction. So Georgia, are you okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Good morning, teacher and my dear friends. Today I am going to discuss about the topic computer managed instruction. Let me share my screen. So is it visible? Okay. So, as the use of information and technology increases, we know that both learning and teaching of both the students and teacher become easier. So, last class we have discussed about computer assisted instruction. That means how we are making use of computer, the learning of students become more easier. Today we are going to discuss about computer managed instructions. So, computer managed instruction means it is an instructional strategies whereby a computer is used to provide learning objectives, learning resources, and the assessment of learner performance. So we know that instructional strategies means these are the techniques that the teachers use to help students to become more independent. So then computer managed instruction, we are making use of a computer in order to provide the learning resources and also to assess the learner performance. So in other way, we can define computer managed instruction as the use of the computers or the softwares to manage the instructional process. The another definition that we can give for CMI is it is a systematic control of instruction by computer in it is characterized by testing, diagnostic learning, prescription, and through record keeping. So we can, in one word, we can say that computer managed instruction makes the work of the teacher more easier by making use of computer. They can provide learning resources, they can assess the learner performance, and makes their work more easier than the traditional way. So let's discuss what are the functions of CMI. The first one, it helps to diagnose the entry behavior of the computer. Using computer, you can be able to diagnose the strength and weakness of the learners in the based of their previous knowledge, and it will also help us to understand their attitude, aptitude, and also their skills. And based on these skills that we diagnose, we'll be able to set the appropriate instructional objectives. That is the second function, that is setting the appropriate instructional objectives. You know that what you mean by instructional objective. It is a statement that will be describe the learner's behavior after completing a certain strategies. So by diagnosing the entry behavior, it will be able to set the instructional objectives according to the need of the students. So it is also one of the function of CMI. The third one is to generating instructional materials and learning experiences. That is, there are certain softwares are available that helps in analyzing the characteristics of the learner, the need of the learner, and the purpose that the learner have. And based on their learner, we will be needs of the learner will be able to provide the appropriate learning experiences using a computer. And also the fourth function is to monitor the progress. That is, CMI proves it is very effective in monitoring the progress of each and every individual learner in a very satisfying manner, and it will be able to register the low achievement of the student and can recognize can identify the defect or the deficiencies faced by the learner, and it also provide the remedial instructions to overcome this kind of deficiencies. So all these are the functions of CMI. It monitor the progress of the each and every students, and also if any kind of deficiencies are they able to provide the remedial instructions to overcome these deficiencies. And the next function is to management of instruction and record keeping. So the computer softwares are available to manage and record the progress of the students and be able to understand their educational background. It is very important. It is very useful in keeping informations of the students like their interest, educational background, and everything. So by making use of computer, we can easily record the information, or we can keep a data of the student about their educational background, their interests, their characters, their needs, etc. And also we know that we have many applications to create to assess the students. So assessment of the students is also becoming more easier by making of use of these softwares and computer programs. So these are the functions of CMI. The next one is we have said earlier that the CMI makes the work of the teacher more easier, because the functions like grading, scheduling, keeping track of the resources, or recording the informations about the students, these all works are done by a teacher alone, and all these tedious processes being automated by use of this computer managed instruction, and thus it makes the work of the teacher more easier. And it also provides an excellent way to organize and integrate both computer managed instructions and computer based instructions and instructional traditional instruction materials. So one of the importance of this computer managed instruction is that only a single computer is required to carry out all these functions. So this is one of the advantage. In one way we can say that only a single computer is necessary to carry out all these functions. So this is all about the function of CMI. Next, let's look how a CMI used. As we said earlier, it helps in tracking the students' performance over a period of time, and also provide the necessary informations about their performance. It helps us to record the individual and group performance data, and also it helps us to provide appropriate instructional strategies based on the objectives, and it helps us to input and storage the student data, curricular data, everything. And it also helps us to retrieval and analysis of the data relating to students scores and activity to the curriculum data whenever we need, because it is being stored in the computer. We can every time retrieve it and analyze the performance of the students. It makes the work of the teacher more easier, and also it helps us to generate various kinds of reports showing the individual and group progress and current status. So this is how the CMI is used. Next, let's look what are the students' roles in CMI. Here, the students are expected to be more attentive and more motivated. Since the students can acquire various instructional strategies by using these softwares, it helps them to generate self-initiated learning and self-directed learning, and learn according to their pace. And it also helps the students to interact with their peers and their instructor more effectively. So these are the students' roles. It helps them to initiate. The main thing is they help them to improve their self-initiated learning and self-directed learning. The next one is the advantages of learners. So we have said that it makes one of the advantages is that only a single computer is necessary to carry out all these functions, and the second one is it makes the work of the instructor more easier, because all the tedious process like scheduling, keeping record of the students, giving instructional strategies, everything is made easier by automating all these processes. And the sequence of this module is very flexible. It is very flexible, and the students can study and progress according to his or her own pace. As the CMI system is basically instructor free, they can learn on their own at anywhere, anytime, as with their pace. So these are the advantages of computer managed instructions. The next I wanted to say a limitation. One of the limitation that was faced while working with this computer managed instruction is the lack of a central computer system. Since a central computer system is necessary for an instructor to identify and control the student activity at different locations at different times, there was a limitation in this kind of system. But later, with the expansion of the cable modems and DSL, and this limitation is steadily being vanished and become a non-issue in base of computer managed instruction, except the remote areas. So this is a limitation which was once faced, but it is being rectified with the expansion of cable modems and DSL. And this is all about computer managed instruction. So in one word, we can say that this computer managed instruction, it defined as it is a category of computer programs that may be used by the educator and the instructor to organize and manage data related to related to certain instruction for achieving certain objective in a most effective way. So this is all about computer managed instruction. I hope everyone understood. Thank you.
Okay. Can anyone say what is the difference between computer managed instruction and computer assisted instruction, which we discussed yesterday? Yes, Georgia.
Ma'am, computer assisted instruction means it makes the learner of the learning of the students more easier by making use of computer in their own pace. In computer managed instruction, it makes the work of the teacher more easier because scheduling, keeping a record of the students is a very tedious process. So by automating it by use of a computer, it makes the work of teachers more easier.
So, very good, Georgia. She already she gave appropriate clarification on computer managed instruction, and now she clarified also more deeply. Can anyone more add more points, or do you have any doubts on computer managed instruction? Anyone? Any doubts? Pakka perfect. Ready for writing exam. Okay, so just I'm going to conclude. The computer assisted instruction, it is a supporting technique, while computer managed instruction is a teaching strategy, or I have to say as an instructional strategy. That is the first difference. She mentioned it. One is a supporting technique, another one is a teaching strategy. In computer assisted instruction, we are just what we mean is some drill and practice or some skill development or something like that. It is with the help of the teacher. Teacher is there, and with the help of the teacher, we are using computer, and we are really practicing something just for the skill development, or some more knowledge verification or assessment or something that depends on the decision of the teacher or discretion of the teacher. But when it comes to computer managed instruction, all the three process, like in teaching, like prescribe, diagnose, at the same time assess, all these process, they are done by the computer itself. So computer is really giving the materials to the student, taking the assessment as well as giving feedback. So for individual teaching, or if I say for personalized teaching, or I mean learning, computer managed instruction is the best method. One is really assisting, while other one is really taking over. നമ്മൾ very complete ആയിട്ട് teaching learning എന്നുള്ള പ്രോസസ്സിന് complete process കൊടുക്കുന്നത് കമ്പ്യൂട്ടറാണ്. The other one is only the teacher is using the computer to make more involvement in learning for the students. So that is the difference between the two. I think all of you understood that. Now I invite Grishma. The topic is the theories of comparing the theories of Piaget and Brunner on teaching and learning process. Grishma is there?
Yes, teacher.
Okay, please.
Good morning, all. Here I have to present the topic compare the theories of Piaget and Brunner in teaching First, we go through theory of Piaget. Jean Piaget, he's a Swiss biologist and he developed the theory of cognitive development. Next slide. And he believed that children develop their cognition and knowledge by progressing through a series of developmental stages. Stages occur in a sequential order, and it is important to note that none of the stages could be missed. Next slide. According to him, to move from one stage to next stage, children go through some concept formation steps. These are schema, assimilation, accommodation, equilibration. Schema is nothing but knowledge which we have already existed. Assimilation is the process fitting new information into the already existed schema or knowledge. Accommodation. It is the process of modification of old schema or old knowledge or learning a new schema or learning a new knowledge. Equilibration. It is a cognitive balancing of new information and old information. We can see, we can understand it through an example. Next slide. So in this picture, first picture, the child has a basic knowledge about mammals, and his mom and he familiar to see zebra. Then his mom added zebra is a mammal. Now the child added this information, that is zebra is a mammal. This knowledge added to the added to his own older knowledge. That is, so there is actually assimilation takes place, fitting new information to the already existed knowledge. Then the second pic shows the boy who thinks zebra are similar to a horse, but his mom says that it is a zebra. So he eventually realized the difference, and he realized there are a lot of different characteristics between zebra and horse. So he can understand both are different. So he from here he understand a new knowledge. So here is accommodation takes place. Next slide. Piaget, according to Piaget theory, he argues that we have to go through 4 stages of cognitive development. First one, sensory motor stage, from birth to 2 years old, and second stage, pre-operational stage, 2 years to 7 years old. Then concrete operational stage, 7 years to 11 years old, and formal operational stage, which is adolescence and adulthood period. Next slide. And another important point is that pre-operational stage again classified into 2: pre-conceptual and intuitive stage. Pre-conceptual stage occurs between 2 to 4 years old. Intuitive stage occurred between 4 to 7 years old. And we can understand one by one. Next slide. Sensory motor stage. The child develops their experience and movement through our 5 sensory organs with the environment. Our brain wants to see, hear, smell, taste, touch, etc. Absent, and one of the main point is that absence of language. Then another point is that object permanence. That is, in this picture we can see a mom show a teddy and then hide that teddy. So in our childhood we think it is gone. But after we grow, we understand the objects continues to exist even we can see them. That is object permanence. So we become curious about everything. We learn to sit, crawl, stand, walk, and even to run. This increased physical mobility consequently leads to increased cognitive development. And also, in the stage, hand, next slide. Pre-operational stage. I already said that it is again classified into pre-conceptual and intuitive stage. Pre-conceptual stage thinking is dominated. That is becomes too imaginative. Lots of fantasies and believe objects are alive. Then, in this pre-operational stage, we learn to speak. Our language development occurs. And another symbolic functions. We can see a picture. We draw a family. In our childhood, we draw a family, but we are not concerned about the perfection. We just satisfy with the symbolic meaning. And another one we love to pretend, which allows us to experience new and learn a lot. Uh, we play doctor and another place. Then another point is egocentric behavior is dominated because in this stage we cannot distinguish our own perspective and others someone else. And next slide. Okay, concrete operational stage. In this important one is absence of reversibility and conservation. Conservation means physical quantities do not change based on the rearrangement. That is an example in our childhood. If we pour a orange juice or something from a normal glass to a taller one, then the amount stays same. But our younger brother will pick the taller glass because they think she or he get more the amount. Let's say logic. So think deductively in this stage. Logical thinking are developed, and egocentric thought diminishes in this concrete operational stage. Then next slide. Formal operational stage. In this stage, think about more abstract concept like love, hate, and another like things, and do mathematical calculations. Imagine the outcome of particular action, and these are the characteristics of formal operational stage. Next slide. Then we have to discuss about Bruner's theory. Jerome S. Bruner. He developed cognitive development theory by his discovery learning. And it is a next slide. And discovery learning method, it is a constructive theory, and that is students construct their own knowledge through their own experiences. Next slide. According to Bruner, in his theory, he emphasizes on remembering, problem solving, decision making, etc. Next slide. According to Bruner, there are three modes of representations. That is one inactive mode, second one iconic mode, and third one symbolic mode. Next slide. Learning modes are here. Inactive mode in which children learn through movement or action. Example, play with a book, and iconic mode, which means learn through images or icons, and symbolic mode, in which children learn through abstract symbols like research our through our language, etc. Next slide. So, okay. Okay, so here we have to discuss about comparison and educational implications of both theories. Oh, one slide is missing, sorry. And comparison of uh, both are agreed things. Points are these are the biological system, which enables the human to make sense of the environment. Both Piaget and Brunner are agreed with this point, and both theories are agreed the point that it is need to construct their own knowledge by experience. Children need to construct their own knowledge through their own experience, and both are and disagree uh, points are, according to Piaget, ultimate goal is logic. For Brunner, three modes it is need for engaging a problem solving skill, and Brunner is focused on problem solving skill or learning by doing. And another point is that modes are not a അതായത് ബ്രൂണോസ് തിയറിയിൽ ഇന്ന ഏജിൽ മാത്രമേ ഇന്ന സ്റ്റേജ് നടക്കൂ അങ്ങനെ എന്നുള്ളതില്ല. പക്ഷേ പിയാഷയിലാണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ പിയാഷെ അക്കോർഡിംഗ് ടു പിയാഷെ some stages are occur in stages are occurred in a sequential order, and none of the stages could be missed. So for Brunner, it is an integrated technique to develop of cognition. For Piaget, shift separate stages mode and different periods of different points of development. So then we have to discuss about the educational implications for both theory. First one is formal education shall be initiated at the stage of 7. And second one is curriculum planning. Both theories are gives valuable advice on curriculum planning. Then third point is that focus on process or method, how to gain answer. Then the fourth point is that always encourage the children to discover and learn new things. Then the fifth one, provide classroom activities for the individuals. And it is important to that accept the individual difference, because each students have their own pace to understand the concepts, or a different rate in cognitive development. And then next point, facilitate learning by providing a variety of experience. Provide a variety of experiences to the children. Next slide. So next point is about intellectual growth. Children's intellectual growth. Piaget theory of cognitive development help add to our understanding of children's intellectual growth. Then teacher plans age appropriate activities to keep student active. A teacher should give appropriate activities in suitable age. Next point, Piaget believed that our thinking process changed from birth to maturity, because we are always trying to make sense of our world. These changes are radical but slow, and four factors influence them: biological, maturation, activity, social experiences, and equilibration. Then Next point, in the classroom, teachers can apply Piaget notions of assimilation and accommodation when introducing a new material. It is a very important point. They can help students approach a new idea through the lens of what they have already learned. So, accumulation, assimilation, these are the very helpful ones to the teaching process. Then, next slide. For rural, the purpose of education is not to just impart knowledge, but instead to facilitate a child thinking and problem solving. So encourage the children the thinking and problem solving skills developing for giving by giving appropriate activities. Then Bruno's learning theory that has direct implications for teaching practices. For example, being aware of the learner's learning mode. So we have to ensure about the learning modes of our students. So it helps you plan and prepare appropriate content for teaching learning process. Then be actively involved in the learning process, which helps the students' motivation. This implies that learning is not about simply being exposed to new information, but it is an active process whereby learners examine, code, decode, interpret new concepts and ideas. From this, we can understand teaching learning process must be an active process. Then only students can clearly understand the concept uh, through coding, decoding, interpreting, etc. Next slide. Okay. Next point, provide proper curricular material based on the intellectual development. Each stage, children's intellectual development is different. So, we should ensure that the curricular material is proper on their different stages of development. Then learning by doing concept by Brunner, according to Brunner, he more focus on learning by doing concept. Uh, then importance on discovery learning, because discovery learning occurs in a problem solving situation using previous knowledge. This we can helpful in teaching learning process. Then importance on provide subject material in order to the appropriate stage of cognitive maturity, which is already mentioned. For science, concept consists of vocabularies related science. So if we can understand the concept, then the child will discover new. So the teaching learning process must be effective. So next slide. So here we discuss the topic. We can conclude that our teaching should be always lead to boost the cognitive development of children by providing appropriate activities and materials at appropriate time of stage, and students will not understand the concept or uh, content if teacher teach it using only teacher's level of understanding. And some practical ways to teach children in each of the stages of cognitive development. For example, we can give opportunities to manipulate objects, test out ideas, and do simple science experiments, etc. And student participation. And in sensory example, sensory motor stage, trial and error. Children learn by trial and error methods. So therefore, providing a stimulating environment. These are the practical ways to enhance their learning from childhood. Thank you. I hope you clear it all.
Thank you, Georgette, for the presentation. Is it clear for all of you? I think all of you have studied about this already in your first or second semester itself. Piaget theory and Bruner's theory. Do you already study the psychology?
Yes.
So you know that the different stages of development and all that things. Now the question what we face here is how it helps in the learning, science learning. How it differs or how it comes. For our exam, it will be some 2 marks or 5 marks question. It may come about a particular theory or educational implication of any particular theory in science learning. So Grishma mentioned so many contextual, the content was so heavy that is so many contextual way of explanation she explained here. I think it's clear for you. But I am just giving a concluding remark. That is, we know that already we gone through that also. The 3 stages of Brunner. What are the 3 stages of Brunner's cognitive theory?
Inactive, iconic, symbolic.
Okay. Thank you, Grishma. What about others? Are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with all these things? No.
Yes, we study Piaget's theory.
Not Brunner's.
Teacher
No,
Bruner's
ma'am.
theory പഠിക്കാൻ
No,
You
teacher.
it completed in the class? No, sure. Okay, just I'm going in short. Brunner, it was a theory long back, it came in long back in the 1960s or something. It basically what she mentioned about it, mainly things about 3 stages, or we had to say 3 modes of representation, I had to say. That is about inactive, iconic, and symbolic. By the name itself, you know that inactive means simply action based, iconic that is image based, and symbolic means language based. So based on this, many theories came. The Brunner itself is having another theory of constructivist theory. This is cognitive theory, and another one, constructivist theory is also there. And he says that, what he says is that a child of up to 1 year, the child is having an inactive kind of memory. So only if that is something similar to Piaget's sensory motor stage itself. So we have some questions on how he is going to explain that. That's another way. So he tells that basically in inactive stage, inactive എന്ന് പറയുന്ന 1 വയസ്സ് വരെയുള്ള കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ കുട്ടി ക്കുള്ള മെമ്മറി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ആക്ഷൻ ബേസ്ഡ് ആയിരിക്കും എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. So that's it. What the student is really doing, that all. Then it come to next year, from 1 to 6 years, they have iconic stage of memory. That is, they remember visual symbols or pictures, all that. And after 7th, they are going to have language memory. I mean, they are going to remember some languages, and that way of communication, perfect communication, come to child only after 7. That is, so then only the importance of symbols comes to the mind of the, kids or children. That is the way in which he explained about the different stages of the development. And but there is some, I have to say, some disagreement. Grishma also mentioned about that. Some disagreement between Piaget's theories, the sensory motor, pre-operational, conveyed operational, former operational stages, and its explanation Piaget gave for that. So, but when I say that, it's clearly easy to understand Piaget's theory. But Bruner's theory is having more explorative nature. That is, when it comes to the higher thing, more, to the higher level. Higher thing means higher level of implication. Bruner is having more implications. Even in curriculum construction also. The spiral curriculum, all this really emerged from his explanation of cognitive development. But some doubts are there, which as a BH student or as a teacher, you have to think about it. This is nothing related to your syllabus, but you have to give answer by yourself to as a teacher, and you have to think how it happens. Bruner is saying that coding system, that is really developing in the child from the young stage itself, is really making the child to grow. Whenever the child goes, this coding system is not only in knowledge acquisition, in behavior patterns, all this the child is having some coding system, and only based on that coding system, the child will respond in various situations even after so many years. So that coding system is what we have to frame. That is, in short, what he is telling, Bruner. But when it comes to Piaget, we know that he is really giving much importance to different stages of development and how we have to involve in different stages of development of the child. All this is really given by Piaget. But in Bruner is not telling something like that. He is telling that, but what we are now really, I have to say, implications in Bruner. That's why we are already telling that up to 5 years, the child is going to develop. After 5 years, especially brain development, after 5 years, what the child has already learned before 5 years, he is going to I have to say, implement in different situations or different contexts based on the contextual factors. So up to 5 years, the child is really learning. After 5 years, he is just implementing. That is, that's why we are telling that we have to give much importance to a kid of up to 5 years. Okay. I am telling about just 5 points you have to think, because all of you are going to become mothers or father, and at the same time teachers. So you have to, some queries are there about the development of a child. നമ്മുടെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ കുറെ ചോദ്യങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിലേ നമുക്ക് ഉത്തരങ്ങൾ കണ്ടെത്താൻ ഒരു ആഗ്രഹം തോന്നത്തുള്ളൂ. ആ ചോദ്യങ്ങളാണ് ഞാൻ പറയുന്നത്. ഫസ്റ്റ് വൺ ഈസ്, അഡാപ്റ്റേഷൻ റിയലി ഹാപ്പൻസ് ഇൻ എവറി പേഴ്സൺ. നമ്മളെ കൊണ്ട് ഏത് സിറ്റുവേഷൻ ഇട്ടാലും നമുക്ക് അഡാപ്റ്റേഷൻ നടക്കും, അതിന് യാതൊരു സംശയമില്ല. ദ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ഈസ് വെദർ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് കണ്ടിന്യൂസ് ഓർ സ്റ്റേജ് വൈസ്. അതായത് നമ്മളെ കൊണ്ട് ഒരു സാഹചര്യത്തിലിട്ടാൽ അത് കണ്ടിന്യൂസ് ആയിട്ട് ആ സിറ്റുവേഷനോട് നമ്മൾ താതാമ്യം പ്രാപിക്കുക എന്ന് പറയും. അങ്ങനെ ആകുകയാണോ, അതോ ഓരോ സ്റ്റേജ് വൈസ് ആയിട്ട്, അതായത് ഇപ്പോ പിയാഷെ ക്ലിയർലി ഡിഫൈനിങ് ഡിഫറെന്റ് സ്റ്റേജസ്, റൈറ്റ്? സോ അതുപോലത്തെ സ്റ്റേജ് വൈസ് ആയിട്ടാണോ നമ്മൾ അഡാപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യപ്പെടുന്നത്, എസ്പെഷ്യലി ചിൽഡ്രൻ. Second question is, we know about natural curiosity in children. So the question is whether this natural curiosity is a result of the language they have. അവർ ഓൾറെഡി പഠിക്കുന്ന ലാംഗ്വേജിന്റെ ഹെൽപ്പോട് കൂടിയാണോ അവർക്ക് നാച്ചുറൽ ക്യൂരിയോസിറ്റി വരുന്നത്, അതോ നാച്ചുറൽ ക്യൂരിയോസിറ്റി ഒരു അത് ഇന്റേൺ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കപ്പാസിറ്റി ആയിരിക്കുകയും നാച്ചുറലി ലാംഗ്വേജ് ആസ് എ ബൈ സൈഡ് അനദർ ഫാക്ടർ which is really developing. അതായത് language is not the key factor that really gives natural curiosity to a child. I think you got the point. കുട്ടിയിൽ നാച്ചുറൽ ക്യൂരിയോസിറ്റി ഉണ്ടാക്കാനുള്ള പ്രധാന കാരണം ആ കുട്ടിയുടെ ലാംഗ്വേജ് കപ്പാസിറ്റി അല്ല, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ലാംഗ്വേജ് അല്ല, കുട്ടിയിൽ ഓൾറെഡി നാച്ചുറൽ ക്യൂരിയോസിറ്റി ഉണ്ട്. ഭാഷ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, അല്ലെ ലാംഗ്വേജ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേഷൻ മേഖല, that you have to know that it's Malayalam or English or any other language. A person, deaf and dumb child is also having a language. We know that it's symbolic language and different ways of language. Language is not mean what we are verbally mean. Okay, so is language is something which really causes this natural curiosity? That's the second question. Third question is, we know that different cognitive structures, way of thinking happens in our life. സോ അത് സ്റ്റേജ് വൈസ് ആയിട്ട് മാത്രമേ പറ്റുള്ളൂ. അതായത് ഒരു വയസ്സുള്ള ഒരു കുട്ടിക്ക് ഇത്ര മാത്രമേ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ, രണ്ടാമത്തെ വയസ്സുള്ള ഒരു കുട്ടിക്ക് 2 വയസ്സുള്ള ഒരു കുട്ടിക്ക് ഇത്ര ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ, അങ്ങനെയാണോ? അതോ വെദർ ഇറ്റ് ക്യാൻ ബി സ്പീഡ് അപ്പ്, നമ്മൾ ഏതെങ്കിലും രീതിയിൽ ഒരു സപ്പോർട്ട് കൊടുത്താൽ ഇതിനെ നമുക്ക് സ്പീഡ് അപ്പ് ചെയ്തെടുക്കാനായിട്ട് സാധിക്കുമോ? ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് അനദർ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ. Another one is children, I have to say, is a child more active by himself or with the elders? അതായത് ഒരു കുഞ്ഞ് സ്വന്തമായിട്ട് നിൽക്കുമ്പോഴാണോ കൂടുതൽ ആക്റ്റീവ് ആകുന്നത്, അതോ മറ്റ് ഒരു എൽഡറിന്റെയോ പിയേഴ്സിന്റെയോ കൂടെ നിൽക്കുമ്പോഴാണോ കൂടുതൽ ആക്റ്റീവ് ആകുന്നത്? അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വാട്ട് റിയലി മേക്സ് ദ ഡിഫറൻസ്? All this is having some answers, okay? ഇതൊക്കെ I will tell you later. Then the last question which I have is, do a child, the symbol of a child can show the cognitive development of the child? ഒരു കുട്ടി, ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ പറയുന്നു 7 വയസ്സുള്ള ഒരു കുട്ടി സിംബോളിക് രീതിയിൽ ആണ് ആ കുട്ടിയുടെ ഒരു മോഡ് ഓഫ് റെപ്രസെന്റേഷൻ എന്ന് ബ്രൂണർ പറയുന്നു. അപ്പോ ഈ ഒരു കുട്ടി സിംബോളിക് റെപ്രസെന്റേഷൻ കാണിക്കാൻ റെഡി ആണെങ്കിൽ ആ കുട്ടി 7 വയസ്സിന്റെ വളർച്ച വന്നു എന്ന് നമുക്ക് കൺഫൈൻ ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കുമോ? ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ഇറ്റ്. അത് തിരിച്ചും പറയാം. ഇപ്പൊ സിംബോളിക് ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് കാണിക്കുന്നില്ല എങ്കിൽ 7 വയസ്സിന്റെ വളർച്ച ആ കുട്ടിക്ക് വന്നില്ല എന്ന് പറയാൻ സാധിക്കുമോ? That's a question. So cognitive development, is any possibility to explain cognitive development based on the symbolic representation? Or is this symbolic way of representation can be replaced by any other mode of representation? So all these 5 questions, these are the 5 questions, and these 5 questions is really under research. ഗവേഷണത്തിന്റെ പല മേഖലകളിലൂടെ so many theories are based on that, and all these things are really came out from these 2 theories of Brunner and Piaget. ബ്രൂണറിന്റെ പിയാഷയുടെയും 2 തിയറീസിന്റെ നമ്മൾ പറയും ഇന്റേണൽ ആസ്പെക്റ്റിലേക്ക് പോയിട്ട് അതിൽ നിന്ന് തിരിച്ചു കൊണ്ടുവന്ന 5 ചോദ്യങ്ങളാണിത്. ഈ 5 ചോദ്യങ്ങളുടെ ഉത്തരം പല സൈക്കോളജിസ്റ്റുകൾ ഇപ്പോഴും പഠിച്ചുകൊണ്ടേയിരിക്കുകയാണ്. They have different various way of answering the questions. Many new theories including constructivism emerged from these type of questions which came from these 2 theories. Okay, thank you, Grishma. I think all of you are noting the points. Now I am inviting Gopika. Gopika, are you there?
Yes, teacher.
Oh, okay, Gopika is going to say about the other 2 theories, Gagne and Vygotsky. Okay, please.
Good morning all, I am Gopika and my seminar topic is the comparison of Gagne and Vygotsky's theory. So let's see the presentation. Was the theory of Gagne, and it is named as Gagne's theory on hierarchy of learning. So this is the psychologist behind this theory, Robert M. Gagne, and he classified different types of learning and arranged it in an hierarchical order according to the complexity. So according to him, there are 8 types of learning. So these are the, it is the representation of hierarchy of learning. At the base, the simplest form of learning is represented, and at the top, the most complex one is represented. And the different types of learning are signal learning, stimulus response learning, psychomotor connection learning or chaining, verbal association learning, multiple discrimination learning, concept learning, principle learning, and problem solving. So these levels are arranged in such a way that higher level of learning is built upon the lower level. That means if for example, if stimulus response learning is taken, this learning happens by connecting different signal learnings, and the psychomotor connection learning happens through connecting different stimulus response learning. So like that, all these learnings are connected. Next, these are the 8 types of learning: signal learning, stimulus response learning, chaining, verbal association, discrimination learning or multiple discrimination, concept learning, principle learning, and problem solving. So he also divided these 8 types of learning into 2. First four things comes under behavior aspect of learning, and the next 4 things comes under cognitive aspect of learning. So let's see each one of these. First one is signal learning. So it's the simplest form of learning. Here, the learner responds according to the signal or stimulus. So it is based on classical conditioning by Pavlov. So here the conditioning is essential. In Pavlov experiment, what he conditioned the dog by using a bell. So the response, that is the saliva, is produced by the dog by hearing the ringing of bell. So this is an example of signal learning, and here the response is involuntary uh, response is produced. So the next one is stimulus response learning. Here the learner develops connection between stimulus and responses by being rewarded. The main thing that comes under this learning is reward and punishment. So according to the reward and punishment, the response of a particular stimuli happens, and it is based on operant conditioning by Skinner. So we know that in operant conditioning, rewards are introduced to increase a behavior and punishment is introduced to decrease a behavior. So this is an example of stimulus response learning. And another example is the learner learns accurate writing skill by being rewarded by the teacher. So these are the examples of stimulus response learning. And third one is chaining. So here the learner develops the ability to connect 2 or more previously learned stimulus response into a linkage sequence. So here the psychomotor skills are developed. So this learning is also known as skill learning. So examples are riding bicycle, playing piano, etc. The fourth one is verbal association, and it is the form of chaining where the links between the items being connected are verbal in nature. So it is one of the key processes in the development of language skills. So these 4 things, first one is signal learning, stimulus response learning, chaining, and verbal association. These 4 things comes under behavior aspect of learning. And the fifth one is multiple discrimination. So here similar stimuli is given to the learner and the learner responds differently. For example, if we look at these examples, the pronunciation is similar: hair, hair, for, there. So this stimuli given to the learner is similar, but the learner responds differently because its meaning is different. So this is an example of multiple discrimination, and the learner discriminates among the similar stimuli and responds accordingly. It is the capacity to make different responses to stimuli that differ from one another. And the sixth one is concept learning. Here, the learner develops the ability to make a consistent response to different stimuli that form a common class or category of some sort. That means here different stimuli are given to the learner, and if the learner can categorize the things according based on the concept that the learner learned, so it is concept learning. In the first figure we can see that different colored shapes are given to the learner, and the learner categorizes it according to the based on the colors. So it's a concept learning. And in the second figure, there are different types of triangles are given. If a learner can identify a right angle triangle from these things, uh, it is a concept learning. And so it is the basis of the ability to compare, classify, generalize, etc. Next, seventh one is principle learning. So here the learner develops the ability to learn relationship between concepts and apply these relationship in different situations. Here the learner know a different concept, and the learner connect these concepts to form a principle. For example, round things roll. The learner know what is round and the concept of round, and he knows the concept of rolling. So if we can connect these two things as round things will roll, so this is a principle learning. So it is the basis of learning of general rules, procedures, etc. And the seventh one is problem solving. It is the highest level of cognitive process according to Gagne, and at this stage the learner combines two or more principles to solve a particular problem. So these four things, that means multiple discrimination, concept learning, principle learning, and problem solving, this will comes under cognitive aspect of learning. So these are the 8 types of learning according to Gagne. So now we are going to see what is the educational implication of this theory. The teaching learning activity should be arranged on the basis of this mental ability of the learner at each level of hierarchy. And the formal education also should be based on this hierarchy of learning. And the teacher should ensure that the learner has acquired the necessary initial state of learning before he introduced to subsequent level of learning. And a due weightage should be given to learning hierarchy while framing the curriculum. So these are the education implications of this theory. So these are all about Gagne's theory. Now we are going to see what is Vygotsky's theory. So there are so many names for the Vygotsky's theory. First one is Vygotsky's learning theory, and it is otherwise known as socio-cultural theory of learning. And next, another name is theory of social constructivism. And Vygotsky is also known as the father of social constructivism. So let's see the theory. First one is socio-cultural theory of development. He says that the cognitive development of a child is based on 3 factors: social interaction, culture, and language. So how it affects affect the cognitive development of a child? First one is social interaction. Vygotsky emphasized that effective learning has participation in social activities, and cultural factor is wide range of experience that a culture would give to a child, and language is the verbal expression of culture. So these are the 3 factors affecting the cognitive development. So this theory is also known as socio-cultural theory of development. And next he says that by birth the child gets some mental functions that are attention, sensation, perception, and memory. So these are called as elementary mental functions. The higher mental functions are achieved by the students by social interactions. So the higher mental functions are independent thinking and independent learning. So this theory is also known as theory of social constructivism. That means the student construct their knowledge by social interactions. So that is the theory of social constructivism. So next he says about the zones of cognitive development. According to him, there are three zones of cognitive development. First one is a zone of or current level of development. Second one is a zone of proximal development or ZPD, and the third one is a zone of potential development. In the figure, thing that is at the bottom level, it is the level of actual development. So it is the level that a student can achieve independently, and the thing that is represented in a pink color is the level of potential development. That means the student can achieve this level with the help of an expert. And the difference between these two levels, potential development level and actual development level, is ZPD, zone of proximal development. So let's see one by one. First one is zone of actual development. It is the actual level of skills and knowledge that can be attained by a child alone. And the zone of potential development is zone of maximum development that a learner can reach with the guidance of an expert. And the zone of proximal development is the difference between what a child can achieve independently and what a child can achieve with the guidance and encouragement from a skilled person. So ZPD is equal to potential level of development minus current level of development. Then he introduced another term, MKO. So this is more knowledgeable other. We just say that in zone of potential development, the students achieve this with the help of an expert. So this expert or this skilled person is known as more knowledgeable other. So who is that? Someone who has better understanding or a higher ability than the learner with respect to a particular task, process or concept, that is more knowledgeable other. And it need not be a person at all. It can be an electrical gadget. So some of the examples are parents, teachers, peers, tools, technology, etc. So the next term introduced by next term in this theory is scaffolding. So it was first introduced by Brunner, and Vygotsky used this term to explain his theory. What is scaffolding? The thing that is done by this more knowledgeable other is called scaffolding. It is a support and assistance that lets the child to accomplish a task that he cannot accomplish independently. And it is a support given by MKO. So it is not about doing the task for the child while he or she watches. It is not about doing shortcuts for the child. It should involve the judicious assistance given by the adult or peer so that the child can move from zone of actual to zone of potential development. So it is a judicious assistance or support given by the more knowledgeable other. So if we take an example, if a student or if a child want to learn swimming, so what the child could do, he just walk near the pond and walk some steps in the water. So that up to that, it is the level of actual development. And if a person comes to help him and he is an expert in swimming, so that person is MKO, more knowledgeable other. So what he did was scaffolding, the supporting child to learn swimming. And the ZPD, the zone of proximal development, is the learning of this skill with the help of the MKO. And the level of potential development is the development, that is the after learning the child will become expert in that skill. So that is the zone of potential development, and it is achieved with the help of an expert or MKO. Okay, I think it's clear. And next he he says about the language development of a child. He believed that language develops from social interactions for communication purposes, and he considered language as the greatest tool for communicating with the outside world. And the roles of language in cognitive development is, it means by which adults transmit information to children, and it is a powerful tool of intellectual adaptation. Now he identified three forms of language. First one is social speech. It is shown by child below 2 years. So they just imitate the words that they hear. So it is an external communication used to talk to others. So next one is private speech. It is delivered by child between 2 to 7 years. So it is self-directed talks. They just talk to themselves loudly. So that is private speech. It is not for communication purpose. And the third one is inner speech. So it is shown by child above 7 years. So it is here the thought and words are merged. So we are speaking what we think. So the it is known as inner speech. So the educational implications of this theory, it encourages students to construct their own knowledge through social interactions. So it is otherwise known as social constructivism. And the next is teacher should be a scaffolder. The role of teacher should be a scaffolder. And when grouping the students, teacher should include MK on each group. So there should be a more knowledgeable other in each group while we are grouping students, and regularly monitor and assess students at independent performer. And there should be an opportunity for collaborative learning. Collaborative learning means peer-to-peer learning. So these all about the educational implications of what this theory, Vygotsky's theory. And so to conclude, first 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 theory that first theory that we have learned is Gagney's theory, and it is based on the it is a cognitive theory of learning. And the next thing that we have discussed is Vygotsky's theory. It's the theory of social constructivism, and I think it's clear to you, and thank you all.
I think it's clear for you about these two theories of Vygotsky and Gagne. Both of them are very important theories. Now also it is, we are really, these theories are really developing again and again in various aspects. So in every way you have to learn these theories, not only, I mean, not only for the exam, in every context, even in the classroom or in your lifetime or in your own life, real life, it will help you a lot. So in short, in very, very short, I have to say what she also think about different conditions of theories, different stages of learning, different patterns of learning is what Gagne says. And Vygotsky simply says about the social interaction, which really helps a lot in the empowerment of a child. That's the great difference. And now we are following what Vygotsky says. That's why we are using constructivism, especially social constructivism, as our major philosophy in the class, and activity oriented classes we are doing, and we are making our child constructors. That is, I have to say, knowledge constructors. They are really constructing knowledge or generating knowledge. So that's all. Thank you, Gopika. Now I invite 10 more minutes is there. Sister Gina, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay, we will go for that. Sister Gina is really taking another theory, that is Ausubel and Gardner's theory. So by that we will end the theories. Okay.
Good morning, teacher, and my dear friends. My seminar topic is Compare the Theories of Ausubel and Gardner in Teaching. Sorry, ma'am. Audible ആണോ? David Paul Osbel was an American psychologist whose most significant contribution to the field of educational psychology, cognitive science, and science education. Learning was on the development and research on meaningful learning and advanced organizers. Osbel believes that understanding concepts, principles, and ideas are achieved through deductive reasoning. Similarly, he believed in the idea of meaningful learning as opposed to rote memorization. He focused on the learning of school subjects and who placed considerable interest on what the students already knows as being the primary determiner of whether and what he or she learned next. Osbel views learning as an active process, not simply responding to your environment. Learners seek to make sense of their surroundings by integrating new knowledge with that which they have already learned. The other names of this theory: reception learning theory, subsumption theory. According to David Paul Osbel, knowledge is hierarchically organized and that the new information will be meaningful when it is very well attached to the already known knowledge, that is existing cognitive structure. The most important factor is the quantity, clarity, and organization of the cognitive structure. Osbel believes that learning of new knowledge relies on what is already known. That is, construction of knowledge begins with our observation and recognition of events and objects through the concept we already have. We learn by constructing a network of concepts and adding to them. The meaningful verbal learning, it gives importance to verbal learning. Meaningful learning occurs when linking the new information to the existing cognitive structure process of meaning learning. Integrate new knowledge with existing knowledge. It focuses on acquire or assimilate or retain new information and to expand conceptual structure. The advanced organized teaching model follows the meaningful learning theory. The first stage of this theory, the student's existing cognitive structure. The cognitive structure means student's knowledge to a subject matter. It includes how he know, how well he know, how effectively the knowledge structured. How meaningfully a student can learn new material depends on his cognitive structure. Before presenting new knowledge, teachers should check the clarity of the existing cognitive structure. For the second stage, meaningful learning set in this stage. The connection could be established between the new material with existing knowledge. In this type, the mental set makes the learners ready to receive new knowledge. There are two processes involved. First, reception, which is employed in meaningful verbal learning. Second, discovery, which is involved in concept formation and problem solving. The Osbel subsumption theory is based on the idea that an individual's existing cognitive structure is the principal and basic factor influencing the learning and retention of meaningful new material. The way to strengthen the student's cognitive structure is through meaningful verbal learning. The process by which new material is connected to the relevant ideas in the existing cognitive structure is called as subsumption. When the information is subsumed into a learner's cognitive structure, it is organized hierarchically. New material can be subsumed into 4 different ways. There is no meaningful learning take place unless a stable cognitive structure exists. The existing structure provides a framework into which the new learning is related hierarchically the previous information or concept in the individual's cognitive structure. The 4 processes of meaningful learning. First one, derivative subsumption. Second one, correlative subsumption. And third one, superordinative learning. Fourth one, combinatorial learning. The derivative subsumption means new material or relationship can be derived from the existing structure. From this type of subsumption, completely new concepts can emerge and previous concepts can be changed or expanded to include more of the previously existing information. The derivative subsumption means the completely new concepts can be emerged and previous concepts can be changed. The correlative subsumption means new material is an extension or elaboration of what is already known. Superordinative learning means it is a specific to general type learning. For example, teaching the students about the concepts of fruits. Children already know the examples of fruits such as mango, banana, apple, etc. But he or she did not know until they were taught that these were all examples of fruits. The fourth type, combinatorial learning. This type learning, newly acquired knowledge combines with prior knowledge to enrich the understanding of both concepts. Both the prior and new knowledge are at the same level in a different but related branches. This is like an analogy. Example, for teaching students about the respiration in plants, we can relate it to previous and acquired knowledge from the human respiration. There are 3 prerequisites in order to significant learning to occur. First one, the material itself must have a logical meaning. Second one, learner must be proactive in the new concepts of knowledge and there is adequate contact between the tendencies. Third one, learner's existing cognitive structure must have the proper assimilation of new knowledge and ideas. Then advanced organizers. It is a major instructional tool proposed by Ausubel. It helps in connecting the new knowledge with already existing knowledge. There are 4 types, expository, comparative, narrative and graphic organization. Comparative studies means new knowledge is present before children by pointing out the similarities and differences of that knowledge with the ones that already exist in our cognitive structure. The second, expository means describe the new content. Third one, narrative, the present the new information in the form of a story to the students. Graphic organizer means visuals to set up or outline the new information. That means picture, concept, graphics are shown. The education implications of this theory. Meaningful verbal learning helps in understanding the concept better than that of the rote learning. Meaningful verbal learning helps in understanding the concepts better than that of the rote learning. Second one, advanced organizers can be used as tool while presenting new information to the children. Ausubel indicates that this theory applies to reception learning in school settings. He distinguishes reception learning from rote and discovery learning. The former because it does not involve subsumption, that means meaningful materials. and the later because the learners must discover information through problem solving. The principles for this application: the most general ideas of a subject should be presented first and then progressively differentiated in terms of details and specified. Instructional material should attempt to integrate new material with previously presented information through comparisons and cross-referencing of new and old ideas. Next, we are going to study about Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. We already studied the Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence proposed that people are not born with all of the intelligence they will ever have. This theory challenged the traditional notions that there is one single type of intelligence, sometimes known as G for general intelligence, that only focused on cognitive abilities. Gardner defines intelligence as a biopsychological potential to process information that can be activated in a cultural settings to solve problems or create products that are of values in a culture. He questioned the ideas that intelligence is a single entity. He argued that intelligence cannot be measured as simple via IQ test. Howard Gardner explained multiple intelligence theory in his classic work Frame of Mind in 1983. The Gardner introduced 8 different types of intelligence: linguistic, logic and mathematical, spatial, bodily, kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalistic, and other one existential intelligence. The bodily kinesthetic intelligence means those who have high bodily kinesthetic intelligence are said to be good at body movements, performing actions, physical controls. They have good motor skills, hand-eye coordination. Their nature is learning by doing rather than seeing or hearing. Dancers, actors, and sportsmen have bodily kinesthetic intelligence. The other one, interpersonal intelligence, they are good at understanding and interacting with other people. These individuals are skilled at accessing the emotions, motivation, desires and intentions of those around them. It allows people to work effectively with others. Example, politicians, counselors, salespersons have interpersonal intelligence. The intrapersonal intelligence means they are good at being aware of their own emotions, emotion states, feelings, and motivations. They have realistic knowledge of his feelings, thoughts, attitudes, and personal strength and weakness. Examples: philosophers, writers, scientists have these types of intelligence. Then visual spatial intelligence, they are good at solving problems using spatial orientations, creating, building, arranging, decorating. They have good knowledge about use the patterns of wide space and more confirmed area. Examples: architects, engineers, artists have these types of intelligence. Verbal and linguistic intelligence means they have the ability to use words well, both written and spoken language. They are good at learning and the capacity to use language to accomplish certain goals. Examples: writers, journalists, and lawyers have these types of intelligence. The logical and mathematical intelligence, they have good at reasoning, recognizing and carried out mathematical operations, analyze problems logically, and calculating numbers and completing puzzles. These are carried out by logical mathematical intelligence. Then musical or rhythmic intelligence means they have the skills in understanding musical structure, rhythms, notes and compositions. They enjoy singing and playing musical instruments, remembering songs and melodies. Musicians and singers have these types of intelligence. Then naturalistic intelligence means they are often interested in nurturing, exploring the environment. learning about their species. They enjoy they enjoy to gardening. They interested the study of biology and zoology. The other one is existential intelligence. They have to solve deep questions about human existence. This is very important. They have to solve deep questions about human intelligence, meaning of life, why they are born and why do we die. These things about existential intelligence. By applying the theory of multiple intelligence in the classroom, educators take into a consideration the different types of learners. The educators consider the different types of learners they might have in their class, reinforce all type of intelligence in every student and allow for the individual's learning process that will ultimately enable each learners to utilize their own space. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. I think she completed almost all the things relating to that Osbel and Gardner. Really collect all the notes by all the by all the presenters about the learning theories. It will help you a lot. So summing up, I want to say you have go through about 6 learning theories of Piaget. Piaget, who's telling in short, I'm telling. Piaget was telling about constructivism. Uh, Constructivism indicates knowledge as a construction of the human being as the product of relationship between environment, the capability, and he was telling about schema that we already discussed. So schema and constructivism, that was his major contribution. When you go for the next, that was by Brunner. Brunner was telling about learning by discovery. So that's it. So then it go for Gagne. Gagne, you already noted about the hierarchy of learning. That's already come. It will come for your exams. And 9 events of instruction. That is also what you have to learn. Gain the attention of learners, inform learners of the objectives, stimulate recall of prior learning events, present the content, provide learning guidance, elicit performance, provide feedback, assess performance, enhance intention, and transfer to the job. These 9 events of instruction by by Gagne and the hierarchy of learning. Signal learning, SI learning, psychomotor, verbal, multiple, concept learning, principal learning, problem solving, all these you have to learn. Then its implications also. So you have to learn all that. Then it come to Vygotsky. Vygotsky was really telling about, in short, just giving some social constructivism, that is describing learning as a process where social interaction that is the key for obtaining knowledge. Then it go for the next one was by Ausubel, by sister, that is she mentioned about meaningful learning. Then about the last one, Gardiner, multiple intelligence, which is now also under research. And you have to say about 8 intelligences that she mentioned, and now it is 10. So go for that also. 8 is already standardized. Other researches are going on. Now they are explaining about 10 intelligences that is really existing in a person. So that's all. Thank you. See you on the next class. Okay.
Thank you.